Okay. Ooh.
Well, welcome everybody to the inaugural Rural Urban Minnesota Twin Talks show. I'm here with my Minnesota twin sister, Karin Sonneman. I'm Jane Leonard. We are the real Minnesota twins. We do love the actual baseball Minnesota Twins too, and we'll show you a picture later on to demonstrate that loyalty. But for now, we want to tell you about our new show. We are turning 66 today. Oh my gosh. Born at the top of the baby boom. We are one of the largest cohorts of the baby boomers. And so my sister and I thought, maybe it's time that we share some of our wisdom and whimsy that we've collected all these years, both in our lives and in our work. And so we are going to give you a little bit of an overview of what this show is all about, and then talk a little bit about some future shows and tell you how we can stay in touch with you and you can stay in touch with us. So Karin, do you want me to take it from the top? I think that's what we agreed to.
Yeah, you take it from the top.
Okay. So hang on, I'm gonna follow the script here for a few minutes and we're gonna go off script. So hang on. So what is Rural Urban Minnesota Twin Talks? Well, it's a monthly conversation show with rural and urban Minnesota twin sisters, Karin Sonneman, who you see there on the other screen, and Jane Leonard, me, and sometimes special guests sharing, as twins know how to do, their wisdom and whimsy from close to 100 years. I can't believe that, Karin. Of combined career and life experience in community, rural, economic development, law, and justice across Minnesota and the nation.
And we will share coffee and cookies. Got to get my cookie here. with neighbors and friends and family, like we did as little kids, as we chew on topics important to and bridging rural and urban people and places in Minnesota and across the country.
And we are rural, urban Minnesota born twins. Karin lives in Winona and is the county attorney in Winona County, which is in southeastern Minnesota. And for those of you coming in from the rest of the country, or hey, the world for that matter, we are right in the middle of North America, right by the Great Lakes and the Canadian border of the United States. And Karin lives in the southeast corner. I retired last year after 40 plus years as a journalist and community development practitioner, and live in St. Anthony Park, which is the farthest northwest neighborhood in St. Paul, in the Twin Cities metro area of Minneapolis, St. Paul, just west of the University of Minnesota St. Paul Farm campus, as we like to call it, and the State Fairgrounds. We also share our family farm in Mille Lacs County with our brother John and our maternal cousins.
Yeah, and actually, Jane, when you said something about where we are located, I also want to note that you and I, even though we're separated by about 110 miles, we live along the Mississippi River.
We do.
So
that's
yeah,
right.
so St. Paul, the
we are
Mississippi.
connected.
Yeah, the Mississippi runs through Minneapolis and St. Paul. In fact, it splits it. And Winona, Minnesota is, as Jane said, in southeastern Minnesota, and it's bordered by the Mississippi with Wisconsin across the river. So,
and actually, I live on the eastern side of the river, and Karin lives on the western side of the river. If you
figure that out.
If you want to know, figure that one out. Okay.
Yeah, and actually, if you come to visit Winona, the river actually runs east to west rather than north to south in Winona. So there's even that more fun.
Same thing in St. Paul.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right.
Right,
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, so Jane and I were both active community volunteers in our respective communities. And with the show starting as we celebrate our 66th birthday today, April 5th, we want to use this platform to help carry on in our family and yours the tradition of learning and discussing issues in and ideas on the health and well-being of our shared homes, our communities, our state, our country, and our world.
Well said. With these rural urban Minnesota Twin Talks, we want to inspire more bridging across and between rural and urban people and places to instill that twin spirit that is in all of us and is needed from all of us to nurture and strengthen community vitality everywhere.
So please join us in as we share our stories, but also as we have some guests and they share their stories. We'll be chewing on the issues as we did when we were little there
All
behind
those many
Jane.
years ago. Yep, behind me is us chewing on the issues at age 1.5, 2.
1.5, right?
Yep.
At our parents' Christmas card of
Yep.
us. But we'll be chewing on issues. We'll, as Jane said, we'll have some whimsy, we'll have some fun, but we'll also have some serious talk, talking with one another and our guests as we seek to build more understanding and actions that encourage and show we are all twins at hearts, helping each other, rural and urban, unite, grow, and thrive together.
Thanks, Karin. That's a great overview. Good starting point. We were inspired to do this again by realizing that we are, in that age group now of over 65. And we've learned so much from our parents, our grandparents, our friends, other family members, our colleagues. We just, wanted to share that and keep supporting all the folks that are working so hard to support communities and the vitality of communities everywhere. We are inspired by the Christmas cards that our parents did for us, with us as twins, and you can see a little bit of that behind me. We found these cups. They are Red Wing. Karin, you want to hold up yours because that's the original Midnight Rose pattern. I only could find one of them, but and I have the driftwood pattern, which is really cool. These were made in the 1950s, right around 56, 57, 58. We were born in 1957, so we're right in that sweet spot. And it's so much fun to use the cups again, and the saucers to hold our cookies. And I think as we've done our work all these years, Karin, having coffee, having cookies, as we learned with our grandparents, with our neighbors up at the farm, that is kind of the social lubricant, if you will, to have great conversations and learn so much about what's happening in your community, and then go out and do things to help your community. So it's really fun to have that again, and we hope to welcome all sorts of guests from our lives and our work to share in ideas and the issues, as Karin said, to chew on the issues that are important in our time, as well as look back a little bit. And in looking back a little, I just want to share those little outfits that we have. Here's the actual. I don't think it fits anymore, but hey, it's and as twins, I usually wore red, right? Red or pink, and mom
Red,
would
right.
dress you in blue, but I've
Yep.
sort of adopted blue with my gray white hair now. But anyway, and I'm just going to quick show you the actual Christmas card, with the full Christmas card. So hang on, I'm going to change this background so people can see the whole wonderful thing. There it is. I'll just duck a bit. So
yeah, I think as Jane mentioned, our parents had our Christmas cards from the time we were born to when our brother joined our family, which was in 1964. And so we have one with John, our brother, and the twins. But mom and dad were really creative people, and put those cards together. Journalists,
so they had access to the Star Tribune photographers.
So and mom was a great editor, writer. So was dad, but mom had that kind of more whimsy, I think, with the especially this first Christmas card that they did. So it is our inspiration. And I just like to say too, I have found in my work both, well, in work and also in like at church, you got to have food for people at meetings and like at church fellowship. It's so important because that's what, as Jane says, it's the lubricant. It helps people feel, like they're sitting down for a meal and chatting.
Sharing,
So
yeah.
so it's important to have our coffee and cookies. So
You bet. Yeah. And it goes down really good, as you can see here. People are very, very happy to be enjoying that together. And we'll just keep that one up, because I just love the expression, especially on your face there, Karin. That's Karin's great smile, still there after all these years. So so and let's spend a few minutes here just telling people a little bit about ourselves, so they can understand a little bit of our background. In all the community meetings I've done, I think it's really important to sort of establish your credibility, but also establish, the kind of fun person and serious person you are. And so I'm going to start out and interview my sister, who is the county attorney. She's in her 4th term. I think you were the first woman elected county attorney in Winona County in all
that's right.
time.
Yeah,
So,
over 150 years. Yeah,
years.
it took that long.
Yep. And she's starting out in her in the 4th term, which are 4-year terms. So done a great job for the county. But tell us a little bit more, Karin, about your sort of total background. I mean, you and I grew up both on our family farm with our grandparents, summer times with our cousins. Great beginning for us as kids. And we spent a lot of time also living in the Washington, D.C. area. Went to all through grade school and high school there, and even college. But we were always drawn to Minnesota. We were born here. And so tell us a little bit about what you did in college to prepare yourself, but then the jobs that you had and how you got to where you are now. What was that track?
Yeah, well, I've always said to people that everything I've done in my life has prepared me for what I'm doing now. And that's certainly true, because as Jane mentioned, we grew up, our father worked for Orville Freeman, when he was governor of the state of Minnesota. And then when Mr. Freeman, as we always refer to him, Mr. Freeman, when he became the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture in the Kennedy administration, we all moved out to DC, and Dad worked there. So, but every summer, Jane and I would go back to Minnesota and spend the summer with our maternal grandparents. So, and then when they retired up to the farm in Mille Lacs County, we spent our summers there. So we really are rural.
Right
there we go. Right. And we really are rural urban kids.
A little bit of sunset with the barn.
Have the best of both worlds. And that really prepared me, I think, for my work as Winona County attorney, because I feel very comfortable talking about rural issues, but also urban issues. And as Jane said, we went to the University of Maryland, and we played. We're on the early days of Title IX, and played on the field hockey and track and field. Yeah, and that teamwork really also helped. I know for both of us in terms of working with people on a team, more collaborative kind of effort. But then I went to graduate school in agriculture and applied economics at University of Minnesota. So I headed back to St. Paul and became an economist, worked for the Public Utilities Commission after I got my master's degree. But it was while I was at the Public Utilities Commission in the early 80s that I realized I would like to go to law school. So I went to law school at night at William Mitchell, which is now Mitchell Hamlin. Got my degree, and during that same time met my husband and had two of our children during law school. And thanks to Jane and her spouse, Lori, and actually our grandparents were still living then too. So had a lot of good family support to help me get through law school with 2 kids.
And Helen.
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
Your
Well,
mother-in-law, Helen.
yeah, gosh.
Yep.
So Carl and I, we were living in St. Paul then, obviously. He was with the Attorney General's office. Yes, he was a lawyer, so I thought, okay, I can be a lawyer too. But decided that we'd like to move to Winona, open up our own law firm, which was a scary prospect. But that was because
especially then, yeah,
in 1990, and that was a lot because Carl's mother lived, was still living, and was very vibrant 70-plus-year-old who then could help us and did. The kids had a wonderful bond with their maternal or their paternal grandmother, sorry. And our parents were still in Washington, D.C. So that's how I ended up in Winona. And then as we did form our own law firm, Carl's still doing that. But I went into public defense work and then decided in 2010 to run for county attorney, because I saw that I could do a lot more as county attorney than as a public defender to help people, because interested in criminal justice reform, but also traditional prosecution too. So anyways, that's a really quick
that's really good
through my life.
Good arc of
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's allowed me to also do a lot of community work aside from my work as county attorney, and I have a very rewarding life outside of my work, but a lot of times the work and my personal life
they overlap, they intersect.
Right. So anyways, and so we raised our kids here in Winona, and now they're all off in different parts of the country, doing really well as adults, but still staying in touch with their mother and auntie. So yeah,
definitely.
So, and what about you, Jane? I mean,
we kind of stuck together up until the graduate school days. But as Karin said, we both went to the University of Maryland, and played on the varsity or on the collegiate hockey or field hockey and track and field teams. Karin was a halfback in field hockey, and I was the goalie. So we were always.
It was actually a fullback.
Fullback, that's right. Yeah. Fullback. Sorry. Yeah, fullback.
We were the defense team.
And forwards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So she was always there. Just slightly ahead of me, which she always is, because we're 6 minutes apart.
That's right. I'm 6 minutes.
Karin's the oldest by 6 minutes. I'm the middle child of our 3 sibling family. But I digress. So I majored in journalism, just very much like our parents. Actually, Dad was an economics major like Karin, and Mom was a journalism major, editor of the Minnesota Daily. So, really inspiring. And I wanted to do agriculture journalism, which at the University of Maryland did not exist as a major, but kind of created my own thing, which I've done pretty much my whole career. Is
pretty much, Jane. Yeah,
created my own jobs and whatever it took to do the kind of work I wanted to do, and did a lot of coverage even in college of agricultural topics. And my first published article was from college, a double truck, meaning the whole middle part of the magazine and crops and soils on integrated pest management. That was back in 1978. Good grief. So I pursued a career after graduate school or after college in journalism. Worked at the Norman County Index. They hired me pretty much sight unseen, just based on my clippings, as we say.
And that was without the Zoom video interviews. That
was without. That was just like, I think I might have talked to the editor by phone once, and took my Volkswagen convertible Beetle from Bethesda, Maryland, College Park, Maryland, and drove it to Ada, Minnesota. And like Karin said, we'd had, great experience on our family farm between two very small towns of just, 100, or let's see,
500 and 200.
500 and 200 some people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was pretty well equipped, to be working in a county seat town of Ada in Norman County on the northwestern part of Minnesota. And just, really had a great time being on my own, for that year and a half, covering everything. I was the feature sports reporter, did features of all sorts of things around the county and in the region, and realized that I needed to probably get a graduate degree like Karin was doing in University of Minnesota. So came back down to Minneapolis, St. Paul after about a year or so in Ada, and started working on a graduate degree in journalism, and realized as I was trying to finish it that I didn't want to be a journalist anymore. I kind of hated the deadlines. Writing was hard. But like Karin mentioned too, all of that prepared me for the kind of work that I eventually did, which was community, rural, and economic development. Journalists are really good observers of the life and work around them, and are able to translate that into writing and sort of oral and visual communication. And so I, as I was going through graduate school, I made the leap as a student worker paraprofessional at the State Planning Agency for the state of Minnesota, thanks to some great people with the Minnesota Community Improvement Program and the Governor's Design Team and Minnesota Main Street and Minnesota Beautiful, as all small town improvement programs landed there thanks to some great contacts at the University of Minnesota as well. And that's where my real career, I think, took off. I eventually became assistant director of that unit within state planning, and we were moved to the Department of Energy and Economic Development in the 1980s, and then stuck with state government, working at the Department of Admin on early internet and telecommunications programs. So Karin and I also kind of
crossed there.
We crossed with the
Public Utilities Commission.
Public Utilities,
Telecommunications. Yeah.
And for me then, this early internet work and video conferencing, I remember sitting up at Bemidji State University working with the Department of Admin, showing people video conferencing. The units were as big as refrigerators, and so I was still in the communications field, but really, kind of hands-on, helping with that sort of development that lent itself to community, economic, and rural development. And unlike Karin, who sort of spent, time always sort of in this law career as a public defender as a private attorney, and then
public
defender for
defender.
20 years, I think, and then now county attorney. I kind of jumped around a lot because it was hard to find a job in community and economic development at the time, and still kind of is. Kind of creating some of my own jobs, but eventually landing as one of the starting staff of the Minnesota Office of Technology, which was created right as internet was taking off, and we helped write some of the early electronic commerce rules and regulations, if you will. We helped get all of the telemedicine, the distance learning. We were there at the very beginnings of the internet age, if you will, in the 1990s. And to this day, I still work with broadband access, affordability, all of these things, particularly for rural Minnesota. And became involved in Minnesota Rural Partners as a board member, and then eventually became executive director of that, and then became the executive director of the Minnesota Statehood Sesquicentennial Commission, which allowed, among other things, Karin and I to actually become Minnesota twins very briefly, throwing out the first pitch. There we are.
Oh my God.
At the Sesquicentennial game against Boston Red Sox. So that was really fun to do that with Karin. That was in 2007-8. And I'm probably forgetting some things, but
well, let me go back.
Yeah,
James,
go ahead. Yeah.
Interrupt here. So
yeah.
When you were at Deed and starting the technology office, I think I was still at the Public Utilities Commission. I was there for 7 years or so, and it was a pivotal time in actually our country, in telecommunications, because deregulation, right? 1984, the deregulation of AT&T and the spinoff of all the little baby bells, which allowed a lot of what now we rely on, which is our smartphones and things like that. But those were the early days where I actually was very in-depth involved and actually wrote the access charges order that would allow non-baby bells to access the network, the telecommunications network, and get into the market. So
healthy competition,
right? Yep. But while Jane was doing the work, Indeed, I was Indeed, not the Indeed now, but I was at at the Public Utilities Commission, and that's actually where I had met my husband Carl. He was assigned to the Attorney General's office, because each agency had an Attorney General or special assistant attorney general for that. So we met at work, but I just wanted to say that kind of looking back, you can see there's all these building blocks toward where we are now, and the intersections, right? Where Jane and I were, we were in different agencies, different work paths, but we were crossing paths too.
Yeah.
So
and we don't like to brag too much because we're humble twins, but we were at really pivotal places when pivotal things were happening. Yeah. In the life and times of Minnesota and the country. Karin brings up the great point about the deregulation of the baby bells and just opening up that competition. And all along, Minnesota has had incredibly wonderful telephone cooperatives, all the way back to the early 1900s, that were always ahead of the curve, and laying down
the smaller rural the smaller rural companies, which are still
strong,
and they've moved into different businesses that are related to providing internet and cable and all that kind of stuff.
And I was fortunate enough in one of my more recent roles at the state to be with the Office of Broadband Technology, the first grants administrator for the broadband grants, with folks that one person, Diane Wells, who worked with Karin
at the Public Utilities Commission.
and that's when I first met Diane, way back when she was filling in for Karin when Karin was on maternity leave. And then we worked together, Diane and I, at the Office of Broadband Technology. So and in between all those, I worked in philanthropy, which needed people who knew more about the rural parts of our state, and I'm kind of one of those unique people, as is Karin, who has a foot in rural and a foot in urban, and can sort of understand and speak both languages, if you will. So and I wrapped up my career, my formal career, because I'm still working as a volunteer in many things, which
I was going to say, you never really retired.
I never really retired, but I'm just not getting paid, as the president of Growth and Justice, which is a 20-year-old nonprofit that was working on equitable economic development and social justice. And so I like to think that, Karin and I have both been working in growth and justice, because she is in justice. I was always working on, progress, ways to help the state progress. And, I think back, Karin, this is the kind of DNA we've come from. I just unearthed a couple weeks ago the incorporation papers for the city of Isle, which is about 2 miles away from our farm. And our great grandfather, Nils Berg, was one of the incorporators back in, I think it was 1911 or 1913. And our great grandparents on the other side helped start the Waukon Presbyterian Church on the other side of our farm. So always involved in community service, whether you're working in public service or in the private sector, always community minded. And we just kind of grew up with that. So I think that's part of what we want to do with this show is rural urban Minnesota Twin Talks is just get across that point that, we don't have to be, this division doesn't have to exist between rural and urban, that we are more alike than we are different. There are differences, but, there's so much to be shared, so much to be helping each other with. And that's what we want to help with this show is, bring people on who are doing that kind of bridging, whether it's in broadband or housing or, all the issues. Karin, you work on statewide committees that are looking at criminal justice reform. I mean, that is something that's shared across the state, obviously.
Well,
I'm
and
working on census that's, is happening everywhere.
yeah, and I think, when yes, I mean, one of my goals as county attorney, as well as when I was a public defender and seeing that we did need criminal justice reform, not extremes on either side, but because of how I think Jane and I grew up being exposed to really some of the great social justice movements that manifested themselves in Washington, D.C., the March on Poverty,
in the 60s.
the 60s, that, for me, criminal justice reform is really about making sure our communities, yes, are safe, but also healthy, and that we have so much
And
work
fair.
to do and fair, right? We have so much work to do for affordable housing, for getting people out of poverty, for, having good jobs that can support a family.
Yep.
And so those issues are not rural versus urban. They are, statewide.
They're universal.
They're universal, right? And so the work that I've been doing as county attorney has really transcended that, just, talking about prosecution or whatever, to because my work is also as civil counsel for the county as well.
Yeah, so you're into all of it,
land use, housing,
human services, health.
and and the mental health, and it is a crisis because our jails are still the mental health facilities, especially in rural Minnesota. But the work that Jane and then I have both been doing independently, but also together, because Jane always and I try to drag her into things too. That's right. We still share as twins.
We still share. That's right. The fun stuff and the tough stuff. Yeah.
So as we said, this show is about also whimsy and fun, but it's also on the serious issues that, again, transcend politics, that are, should be nonpartisan issues, that should be not rural urban fights. So
and I think I look back to, again, how we were raised particularly by our parents, but also by our grandparents, who we spent so much important time with in the summer, watching them do their work on the farm, but also the way that they were engaged in the community, in church, and the Lions Club and the Sportsman's Club, whatever. but
The garden club,
the
the
garden club,
ladies'
yeah,
aid.
the ladies' aid at church, which
Yeah.
was started by my namesake, Aunt Jane.
Right, Jane
Sanson,
and our great grandparents.
and
Yeah.
and Florence, our great grandmother, Florence
Mhm.
Bezanson, Florence Haverstock Bezanson. And they were pragmatists too. That's the thing,
Mhm.
I think, is that
That's,
we
yeah,
lose
huge.
sight of this in this hyper partisan era that we're in, is that let's just be pragmatic, folks.
Right,
We've
exactly.
got to
That's,
we've got
yeah,
to work on
that,
some basics here.
right.
Like,
That has become my favorite word, Jane, pragmatist,
yeah,
because it really is true. I mean, let's cut out all the crap of,
like,
the politics
why
and
does it have to
let's,
be about winning the political
right,
game?
right.
Like
Yeah.
how about let's be be
Or
pragmatic.
a power
Right.
struggle.
Yeah.
It should be
Yeah.
about let's do what's right. It's as I've got on my mantle at work, the saying from Martin Luther King that it's always right to do the right thing.
Right thing. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Jane and I are big into the common good,
We are. And progress, and not,
right.
progress is not a bad word. In fact, somewhere in here I have something from our grandfather who worked at John Deere for basically his whole career. That pride in progress, that was one of the sayings, is like, and
Right, the
it's a
John Deere
humble,
marketing, right? But
yeah,
it's still good.
it's
Yeah.
yeah,
Right,
and
progress.
so
Mhm.
if we can get more of that humility and humble pragmatist, and I think as twins, we have a lot to share, that we kind of grew up without these individual egos almost, because
Right.
we had to share so much right from the get-go. I mean, I pushed Karin out, 6 minutes early.
She's still pushing me.
And
Yeah.
I'm still pushing a little bit on getting out there, but it's there's so much more we can accomplish when we do things together, and when we share the labor, and share the fun.
And
So
not worry about who takes the credit.
who takes the credit, right?
Yeah, I
Exactly.
mean, that's
Yeah,
a big thing.
that's
So
a twin mantra, is don't worry
yeah,
about who
right,
takes the
right.
credit.
Yeah, right.
Yep. So so we want to have this show be as we said, a little whimsy, hopefully some wisdom that we can share from our years, our 66 years,
Mm.
but also with guests that that we know, colleagues from across the years, colleagues that are working right now in places that really, we want to lift their voices and help them be heard. All the great ideas that are out there that maybe need a little help. So that's what our show will hopefully be featuring. Stick with us. And I don't know, Karin, if you want to say a few closing words here, so we can try to keep this to sort of a half an hour, maybe 40 minutes. I was talking to Thomas, Karin's son, who lives here in St. Paul, and we had lunch the other day, and he said, yeah, these shows are about 30 or 40 minutes, or sometimes an hour. So I think we're right in that sweet spot, Karin.
Well, that's good. Yeah, because
Yeah.
and you're right. I as Jane mentioned, Thomas is one of my kids. And I have two others, James and Jane, named after her aunt Jane. But they're always talking about the podcasts that they listen to, and I must admit I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. So this is my venture with Jane into this, and really looking forward to. Jane and I have always had a great way of talking to each other, or talking at the same time, or as you probably notice, we talk
While we
like
breathe
breathing in, right? It's very
we can talk.
efficient.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very efficient.
And it's a
sometimes
Swedish trait, apparently,
it
because
drives our
somebody,
spouses crazy
right,
sometimes. But it's a great way to keep talking.
save time, right? Yeah.
Especially as somewhat introverted people. I mean, even though we're doing this show and we are public facing people,
Yeah.
there's,
Well,
but
we're definitely, because we both need quiet time to
we need quiet time.
regenerate.
Yes. Yes.
So,
yes.
but yeah, I'm excited about doing this, partly because I get to do it with Jane, and I don't see her very much since she's up in St. Paul and I'm in Winona, and you'd think, we're pretty close to drive, but we're busy people in our
2 hours, but
communities.
yeah.
We really would love to have, we plan to have some guests from both parts of our worlds, urban and rural. Looking forward to that, and always
stay
having
tuned.
coffee and cookies.
Right, and chocolate chip cookies, especially. That's what we grew up on, chocolate chips,
and
and coffee.
So check out the Star Tribune article. I thought it was really great that there was an article earlier last week about the 10 top chocolate chip cookies in the
we will be putting up hopefully when you see this show, we'll have a website up, and in fact I'm gonna just share this screen here while we're ending our show, so you can see a little bit more about how we can stay in touch with you all. So hang on, Karin, we'll see what happens. Sure,
and that just reminded me, when I said Twin Cities, there's the other twins, right? St. Paul and Minneapolis.
That's right. Yeah.
We're born in Minneapolis, but lived more in St. Paul. But so we're twins.
So here we go.
The twins from the Twin Cities and Winona.
Well, I'm having a slight technical difficulties, but
as we all remember from those of us, of our age, the AV difficulties from high school. AV,
we need the AV person. Yes.
Audio visual.
We want to thank you all for joining us. And let's see, I'm I'm just trying to get to my PowerPoint here that shows. Here we go. I will read it, and then we'll see if we can post it. There, can you see that now?
Yeah,
there we go. Okay, awesome. Yeah. Do you want to read it, Karin? Just
sure.
Okay. Audio's sake.
Yeah. So we want to thank everybody for joining us on our inaugural April 5th 66th birthday show. If you have show ideas or would like to join us as a guest for coffee, cookies, we'll provide the coffee and cookies, and issues to chew on, write to us at MN TwinTalks@gmail.com, and check out our website at www.MNTwinTalks.org for updates, chatter, and great chocolate chip cookie recipes. So thank you. Yeah. So
yep, and I will stop sharing so we can get it back on the screen together. And all right, so stay tuned. And we'll maybe even have a different Red Wing cup next time. I don't know.
Feature some great old Red Wing that we have. Our mother was a great antique hound, and so we've got a lot of stuff.
Thank you, Mom.
Thank you, Mom. So and my mother-in-law Helen collected Red Wing too. So we've got some good stuff to.
So we have a treasure
share.
To get
we'll
through.
Bring out.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're doing the long Minnesota goodbye.
Goodbye. Yep. Here we go.
All right, I'm gonna stop recording in just a few seconds, but Karin, I love you.
Love you too, Jane. And
we'll see our looking forward to the next show.
So. Yep, sounds good. Okay. All right, see y'all later. Bye,
everybody.